Nokia ruled half the world, then vanished. Before they vanished, Nokia's phones were everywhere. From the hands of farmers in rural India to executives in Tokyo, the Nokia N95, a marvel of engineering, packed a camera, GPS, and internet browsing into a single device. It was the gold standard, yet inside the company, whispers of change were already stirring. By 2007, Nokia's market share had peaked at nearly 50%. The company's revenue soared past 15 billion euros annually. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet revolution was underway. Engineers in Nokia's labs had already begun experimenting with touchscreens. Long before Apple's iPhone would change everything, these prototypes were nothing like the clunky, stylus-dependent devices of today. They featured intuitive multi-touch gestures, sleek designs, and software that could rival anything Apple would later release. Yet Nokia's leadership chose to ignore them, clinging to the familiar Symbian operating system instead. The decision to stick with Symbian was a gamble. The software was powerful but outdated, built for feature phones in an era when smartphones were just beginning to emerge. Meanwhile, Apple's Steve Jobs was quietly assembling a team to create something revolutionary. Nokia's engineers knew the risks, yet no one dared challenge the status quo. The fallout began in 2008. The iPhone launched, and the world fell in love. Sales exploded. Nokia's once unshakable lead began to crumble. The company's stock price, which had once been valued at over 100 billion euros, started to plummet, yet no one could have predicted just how fast the collapse would be. The first cracks appeared in the form of declining sales. Consumers, who had once lined up for hours to buy a Nokia phone, now waited for Apple's latest model. The shift was sudden. The company's once ironclad supply chain, built to handle millions of feature phones, now struggled to keep up with the demand for something entirely different. Nokia's engineers, who had spent years perfecting the art of mobile hardware, found themselves at a crossroads. They could either adapt to the new era of smartphones or cling to the past. The choice was clear, but the consequences would be catastrophic. By 2009, the writing was on the wall. Nokia's once unassailable throne was beginning to wobble. The company's leadership, however, was slow to act. They poured billions into marketing campaigns that no longer resonated with consumers. They ignored the warnings from their own engineers, who pleaded for a shift toward touchscreen technology. The result was a corporate suicide note written in ink and blood. By 2010, the damage was irreversible. Nokia's market share had plummeted to a mere 10%. The company's once proud engineers were laid off in waves. Factories that had once hummed with activity now stood silent, their machinery gathering dust. The empire that had ruled the mobile world for decades was now a shadow of its former self. The story of Nokia's fall is often told as a cautionary tale of complacency, yet the truth is far more complex. Behind the scenes, Nokia's engineers had already invented the future. They had touchscreens, intuitive interfaces, and hardware that could have dominated the smartphone era. But the company chose to ignore it all until it was too late. The cost of this miscalculation was staggering. Nokia's valuation, once worth over 300 billion euros, would eventually collapse to nearly nothing. The company's once legendary status became a footnote in history. Yet the question lingers, what if Nokia had seen the future? What if they had acted in time? The answer could have changed the course of technology forever. The legacy of Nokia's mistake is a reminder of how quickly empires can fall, and how fragile even the most dominant industries can be. It's a story of innovation stifled, of vision ignored, and of a company that once ruled the world now reduced to a distant memory. The question remains, could history have been rewritten if Nokia had embraced change? The year was 2007. Nokia's towers loomed over every continent like unshakable fortresses. Their Symbian OS ruled the world, a fortress of code built on decades of dominance. Engineers whispered about the future, touchscreens, sleek glass surfaces. But the brass in Helsinki insisted on perfection first. Every line of legacy code was sacred, every upgrade a meticulous ritual. The result? a company frozen in time while the world raced ahead. Inside Nokia's labs, prototypes glowed under fluorescent lights, touchscreens, curved displays, devices that felt alive, but the higher-ups dismissed them as gimmicks. Symbian is proven, they declared. Why risk it all on untested innovation? The irony? Those very prototypes would later be called revolutionary when Apple and Samsung brought them to market. Meanwhile, Nokia's engineers, brilliant but stifled, watched their ideas gather dust while competitors sprinted forward. By 2010, the cracks in Nokia's armor were visible to everyone but its leadership. Smartphones with vibrant screens and intuitive interfaces flooded the market. Consumers didn't just want phones, they wanted gateways to the future. Nokia's Symbian devices, clunky and outdated by comparison, became the punchline of tech jokes. The company's once unshakable confidence had curdled into denial. We'll fix it, they promised, but the damage was done. The world had moved on without them. This is just the beginning. Subscribe to see more amazing content. Fire. Google's Android was the wild card no one saw coming. A free, open-source operating system that could have been Nokia's salvation if only they'd acted sooner. In secret meetings, Google's executives pitched a partnership. Nokia's hardware, Android's flexibility, could have crushed Samsung before it even began. But Nokia's leadership, paralyzed by fear of change, turned them down. We don't need outside help, they insisted. Little did they know, that refusal would hand Samsung the keys to the smartphone kingdom. Samsung, meanwhile, was a hungry predator circling Nokia's corpse. Their Galaxy line was still in its infancy, a fledgling compared to Nokia's dominance. But with Android's open framework, Samsung could iterate, improve, and dominate. Every day Nokia hesitated, Samsung gained ground. By 2011, Samsung's Galaxy S had stolen the spotlight, its sleek design and powerful specs leaving Nokia's devices looking like relics. The writing was on the wall, but Nokia's leadership refused to read it. Desperate times called for desperate measures. In a last-ditch effort to stay relevant, Nokia struck a deal with Microsoft. The idea? Merge Nokia's legendary hardware with Microsoft's Windows Phone OS. It was a marriage of opposites. Nokia's durability and craftsmanship paired with Microsoft's clunky, uninspired software. The result? A product so confusing and frustrating that even loyal Nokia fans abandoned ship. The deal wasn't just bad. It was a death sentence for both companies. The engineers who built Nokia's empire were now trapped in a nightmare. Their phones, once the envy of the world, were now seen as jokes. Colleagues who had once innovated with pride now worked in silence. Their ideas ignored. The once proud Nokia logo, emblazoned on devices that defined an era, now carried the weight of failure. The company's once unshakable confidence had turned to despair. The question on every engineer's mind was simple. How did we get here? The Symbian OS, once the backbone of Nokia's empire, had become its Achilles heel. It was slow, outdated, and incompatible with the modern world. Developers abandoned it in droves, lured by the promise of Android's flexibility and Apple's seamless ecosystem. Nokia's once dominant position in the market had collapsed overnight. The company that had once controlled nearly half the global market was now a shadow of its former self, clinging to relevance in a world that had moved on. Google's Android, once a wild card, had become the undisputed king of the smartphone world. Nokia's refusal to embrace it had handed Samsung the throne. The Galaxy line, once a fledgling, had grown into a juggernaut, its devices dominating shelves and wallets worldwide. Nokia's engineers, who had once pioneered the industry, now watched in silence as their former rivals stole their legacy. The irony was bitter. Nokia had built the future, only to let someone else claim it. Microsoft's Windows Phone, once a desperate gamble, had become a laughingstock. The deal that was supposed to save Nokia had instead sealed its fate. The OS was clunky, the ecosystem non-existent, and the market had moved on. Nokia's hardware, once the envy of the world, was now trapped in a dying ecosystem. The company's once proud engineers now worked on a product that no one wanted. The question was no longer about survival. It was about how quickly Nokia could fade into obscurity. The engineers who had once built the future now found themselves building a product that no one wanted. Their once revered company was now a cautionary tale, a ghost of what it had been. The once unshakable Nokia empire had crumbled under the weight of its own stubbornness. The lesson was clear. In the world of technology, standing still meant falling behind, and Nokia had paid the ultimate price for its refusal to move forward. What if Nokia had seen the future? What if they had embraced Android, not Microsoft? What if they had trusted their engineers, not their boardrooms? The answers to these questions aren't just about Nokia. They're about the future of every company that stands still while the world moves on. The story of Nokia's fall isn't just a tale of missed opportunities. It's a warning, and the warning is this: in the end, it's not about the hardware. It's about the software, and the software is always changing. Imagine a timeline where the Finnish giant never chose Symbian. In 2011, a secret prototype reveals a completely different path. The world watches as Nokia finally embraces the open-source revolution. Nokia launches the N9, but this time it runs pure, native Android. The specifications are staggering, leaving competitors gasping for air. The device looks beautiful and feels incredibly premium in the hand. The camera isn't just good. It is legendary. It crushes the early iPhone sensors with ease. Photographers realize they do not need to carry heavy DSLRs anymore. The phone does not break. It is built like a tank. Every drop feels safe because the engineering is absolute perfection. It feels indestructible in your pocket. Samsung is panicking. Their Galaxy S2 is facing a superior rival. The Korean giant suddenly finds itself in a defensive position it cannot escape. Nokia controls the world's factories. They can flood the market with devices. Supply chain dominance becomes their ultimate weapon against any competitor. The marketing campaigns are aggressive. They own the narrative of durability and reliability. Consumers trust the brand implicitly, creating an unshakable loyalty. In 2010, Nokia's Lumia phones were already whispering about a future where hardware alone wouldn't save them. Their engineers knew silicon alone couldn't outrun the software revolution. The world was shifting from phones to platforms, and Nokia was clinging to the past like a sinking ship to driftwood. Nokia's factories in Finland churned out millions of phones yearly, but their real treasure lay buried in patents and optics. Their camera lenses could see in the dark what competitors only dreamed of. Yet, without the right software, those lenses were just glass without a soul. By 2011, the writing was on the walls. Nokia's Symbian OS was a relic. Microsoft's Windows Phone was a half-hearted attempt to save a dying empire. Meanwhile, Google's Android was eating the world, and Apple's iOS was turning smartphones into gateways to a digital universe no one could escape. Imagine if Nokia had embraced Android in 2010, not as a secondary brand, but as their primary weapon. Their hardware could have dominated the market while Google's software ecosystem grew around it. Nokia's cameras, durability, and design would have made Android phones irresistible to consumers who still trusted the brand. Nokia's engineers had already built the future in secret. Their labs in Finland had prototypes of touchscreen phones with glass front-to-back displays years before the iPhone. These weren't just phones. They were gateways to a new era of connectivity, one where hardware and software danced together seamlessly. Had Nokia chosen Android early, their phones would have been the gold standard. Consumers would have flocked to Nokia's Android devices, not just for the brand, but for the unmatched quality of their hardware. The iPhone's camera would have been overshadowed by Nokia's superior optics, and Samsung's Galaxy line would have never reached its current dominance. The key to Nokia's potential wasn't just in their hardware. It was in their ability to control the entire ecosystem. Owning the hardware meant controlling the infrastructure for future technologies like 5G and artificial intelligence. Nokia could have become the backbone of the digital world, not just a relic of the past. But Nokia's greatest mistake wasn't just clinging to Symbian. It was failing to see that the future of technology wasn't just about selling phones. It was about controlling the narrative, the infrastructure, and the very fabric of how people interacted with the digital world. And in that, Nokia lost the game before it even began. In 2020, the tech world is dominated by companies that didn't just sell products, they sold ecosystems. Apple's App Store, Google's Play Store, and Amazon's cloud infrastructure are the new cash cows. Nokia, however, sold phones and missed the revolution entirely. Their hardware was worthless without the software to make it sing. The lesson from Nokia's fall is clear. In the tech industry, survival isn't about protecting your cash cow. It's about destroying it to build something greater. Companies that cling to the past while the world moves forward are doomed. The future belongs to those who dare to kill their own empire to rise again stronger. Nokia's story is a cautionary tale of what happens when a company refuses to adapt. Their hardware was unmatched, but without the software and ecosystem to back it, they became just another footnote in history. The question remains: how many other giants are clinging to their past, unaware that their empire is already crumbling? In the end, Nokia's tale is a mirror held up to every corporation today. The tech world rewards those who innovate, who disrupt, and who dare to reinvent themselves. Those who don't will find themselves watching from the sidelines as the future passes them by. Their once great empire reduced to dust. Welcome. Before we begin, hit subscribe so you don't miss our daily updates. Bell don't miss out. Subscribe today for exclusive content tomorrow. Wrapped gift.